For more than 100 years, a single small book has been forcing the world's greatest scholars to admit total defeat. The text is written in a language that exists in no dictionary on Earth. The illustrations depict plants that do not exist in nature. Since 1912, this manuscript has become a genuine curse for linguists, mathematicians, and elite military codebreakers. Even the most powerful supercomputers and the most advanced artificial intelligence algorithms have failed to translate a single line of its dense, precise text. What we have is an artifact whose authenticity has been fully confirmed by science, dated to the early 15th century, yet which remains completely impenetrable to modern understanding. In the summer of 1912, Polish book collector and rare antiquities dealer Wilfrid Voynich arrived at the Villa Mondragone near Rome. The imposing, shadowy building belonged to the Jesuit order. The monks were facing serious financial difficulties and had decided to quietly sell part of their library to raise funds for restoration. Voynich carefully sorted through stacks of dusty volumes, hoping to find something valuable for resale. In one of the old trunks, tucked among ordinary religious texts and historical chronicles, his hand landed on a strange bundle wrapped in rough parchment. The moment the antiquarian opened the book, he understood. What he held was something without parallel in the history of the world. At first glance, the manuscript looked old and worn, but its contents induced an immediate sense of disorientation. No title, no author's name, no familiar date. Instead of recognizable Latin letters, the pages were densely filled with neat, fluid script in an entirely unknown language. Wilfrid Voynich was far from an ordinary man. In his youth, he took part in revolutionary activities in Poland, escaped from Siberian exile, made his way to London, and opened his own bookshop. His eye was trained to spot fakes and rare artifacts. He noticed the anomaly immediately. The letter forms resembled European writing from the 14th or 15th century, but not a single word was recognizable. The text looked so natural and self-assured that the idea of a meaningless string of random symbols seemed implausible from the very start. The collector purchased the manuscript and devoted all his remaining years to trying to understand what he held. He was firmly convinced he had found an encrypted repository of knowledge belonging to the great scholars of the past. All attempts to find any reference to this text in other archives of the era ended in failure. From that moment, the manuscript bore the name of its new owner forever and began its ascent to the status of the most inaccessible book on the planet. The manuscript was a small book, approximately 15 by 23 centimeters. The cover was plain yellowed parchment, bearing no decorations or inscriptions. Inside were around 240 pages, though the numbering suggested there had originally been more. Some leaves were folded several times and, when opened, expanded into large maps and diagrams, something entirely atypical for medieval books. The material was high-quality calfskin that would have cost enormous sums at the time, indicating the creator possessed considerable resources and spent years of painstaking labor on the book's production. Remarkably, over centuries, the ink had not faded. It remained bright and sharp. The text was written with a quill pen in an extremely small and even hand. No trace of haste, no hint of uncertainty in the craftsman's work. And here is what is truly strange. The pages contain not a single crossing out, not a single correction. It looks as though the author was transcribing a carefully verified draft rather than painfully encrypting every word. Such an approach contradicts the logic of most encoded documents of that era, which typically appeared chaotic due to the very nature of the coding process. The Voynich manuscript announces itself from the first glance as something alien to everything around it. It fits no known cultural tradition, neither European, nor Eastern, nor Asian. And that is not all. The most substantial section of the book is devoted to botany and resembles an ordinary plant reference guide of its era. Hundreds of leaves display flowers, stems, and roots in shades of blue, green, and brown. But here's the problem. Not a single one of the depicted plants exists in nature in the form shown. Botanists attempted to classify the species and every time encountered impossible anomalies. One plant might have the root of one known species, the leaves of another, and the petals of a third. These chimeric creations look either like the product of unbridled imagination or a deliberate attempt to mislead the reader. Some flowers have serrated leaves resembling a predator's teeth, while their roots resemble coiled snakes or human limbs. Researchers propose theories about rare species from distant lands, but no expedition has ever found anything remotely similar in the real world. The botanical section is followed by the astronomical portion, and here the researcher plunges into an even deeper abyss. The pages are filled with stars, suns, and moons, arranged into complex circular diagrams. Familiar zodiac signs appear: Pisces, Taurus, surrounded by captions in that same unreadable script. Most striking, the star charts in the manuscript do not correspond to any known astronomical system of the past. Constellations are in chaotic order, and the number of stars within them does not match what a medieval observer could see with the naked eye. Particular attention is drawn to a double-page spread containing 9 large circular medallions. Connected by lines, these diagrams resemble either maps of unknown islands or models of systems from an entirely different dimension. Scholars tried to correlate them with real maps of the era, and every time ran into a wall of inexplicable symbols. But the truly shocking section is the biological one, the section devoted to human anatomy and healing practices, where human figures appear in strikingly unusual circumstances. Dozens of illustrations show women, some pregnant, immersed in strange green pools. Their faces wear calm expressions that sharply contrast with the unsettling environment. The pools are connected by complex systems of pipes and reservoirs, resembling components of some technical apparatus. These drawings look like illustrations of technologies that simply could not have existed in the 15th century. Some researchers suggest they depict ancient hygienic practices or metaphorical processes of transformation. Others see an attempt to illustrate the internal structure of the body through the analogy of a plumbing system. But even under the most detailed analysis, the biological section remains beyond the comprehension of any modern physician. Toward the end, illustrations grow sparse. The pharmaceutical section begins: apothecary vessels, jars, bundled roots. The text is divided into short paragraphs, each marked by a small star, resembling a list of recipes composed with meticulous thoroughness. Scholars hoped ingredient names might yield a key to the language. Not a single symbol matched accepted alchemical abbreviations. The final pages contain no illustrations at all, only solid columns of text, as though the author was rushing to finish, leaving behind evidence of either genius or madness. When Voynich investigated the history of his find, he uncovered a chain of owners leading to the heart of medieval Europe. The most compelling leads surfaced in the archives of Emperor Rudolf II's Prague court, who ruled at the turn of the 16th and 17th centuries. This monarch was known for his obsessive passion for magic, alchemy, and curiosities, on which he spent entire fortunes. There is documentary evidence he purchased the mysterious manuscript for 600 gold ducats. Imagine paying roughly $100,000 today for a small, old book. Rudolf was convinced that within it lay the secrets of the philosopher's stone and eternal life. Found alongside the manuscript was a 1665 letter from the rector of Prague University, Johann Marcus Marci, asking the renowned scholar Athanasius Kircher to help with translation, claiming the book had once belonged to the English philosopher Roger Bacon. Bacon was long considered the leading candidate for authorship. He lived in the 13th century and was so far ahead of his time that contemporaries suspected him of forbidden mystical practices. He studied optics, mechanics, and chemistry, predicting self-propelled vehicles and flying machines. Supporters argued he may have encoded his discoveries to escape church persecution. But later, research disproved this due to the excessive gap between dates. Another candidate was Jacobus Sinapius, Rudolph's personal physician and alchemist, whose name was found on the first pages beneath a layer of chemical compounds. Sinapius oversaw the imperial medicinal herb garden, which might explain the hundreds of botanical illustrations. But forensic experts established the signature was added significantly later than the text itself. In recent decades, a captivating hypothesis emerged linking the manuscript to Leonardo da Vinci. In the astrological section, 15 women appear around the sign of Aries. April the 15th is Leonardo's birthday. Supporters see in this an encoded message from the author about himself. They also note the drawings appear made by a left-handed person, and da Vinci was supremely skilled with his left hand and frequently used mirror writing. Nevertheless, this hypothesis crumbles against the facts. The artistic style of the Voynich Manuscript is far too simplified and naive, utterly incomparable with the flawless anatomical precision of Leonardo's work. Nor should we forget the army of anonymous alchemists who labored in secret laboratories across 15th century Europe. Persecution by the Inquisition made a unique secret language quite literally a matter of survival. The manuscript may have been the collective work of a group of scholars who gathered all their knowledge in one place and protected it with a code that had no key. Each historical figure adds a new layer of mystery, but none provides a definitive answer. The author himself seems to have deliberately erased himself from history, leaving behind only this silent monument. For a long time, skeptics were convinced the entire story was a grand hoax fabricated by Voynich for personal gain. It seemed logical that an experienced dealer could obtain old leather, recreate ancient ink recipes, and produce a forgery to drive the scholarly world to distraction. However, in the early 2000s, physicists from the University of Arizona subjected 4 tiny parchment fragments from different pages to radiocarbon dating. The result silenced even the most fervent critics. The animal hides had been prepared between 1404 and 1438. The manuscript is a genuine artifact of the early Renaissance, not the product of a 20th century adventurer's imagination. Following the physicists, chemists examined the structure of the inks and pigments. Every pigment corresponded entirely to early 15th century technology. Not a trace of modern substances or artificial fixatives, any of which would inevitably betray a later forgery. The fact that the colors have retained their richness after 600 years testifies to extraordinary material quality. Scholars also confirmed the text, and illustrations were applied to the parchment almost immediately after it was prepared, completely ruling out the theory of old blank stock. Once physical authenticity was established, researchers searched for details pointing to a specific place of origin. One of the most valuable finds was a drawing of a fortified wall with towers bearing battlements shaped like a swallowtail. Such fortification elements were used exclusively in northern Italy during a particular historical period. This allowed historians to narrow the search to Milan or Venice. The author lived at the very heart of Europe, at the epicenter of its turbulent scientific and cultural changes. Yet even modern technology hit its limits when it came to the handwriting itself. Under high magnification, the writer's hand moved across the page at remarkable speed without any pauses for deliberation. There are no impressed pencil lines on the parchment, no traces of preliminary layout, the marks that calligraphers invariably leave. The impression is of a person writing in this language as easily as we write in our mother tongue. This observation deals a devastating blow to the theory of slow, painful, word-by-word encryption. When professional codebreakers took up the challenge, they were confident the manuscript would fall within months. The most brilliant minds of the world wars Those who read enemy headquarters' secret ciphers with ease ran into an invisible wall. William Friedman, the legendary cryptographer who cracked the Japanese purple cipher, devoted 30 years of his life to this book and admitted defeat. Today, supercomputers and AI algorithms run through millions of combinations per second, comparing the manuscript's symbols against hundreds of languages. The artificial mind returns only contradictory results. At one moment finding roots in ancient Hebrew, at the next pointing to dialects of forgotten Native American tribes. But it gets weirder. The most compelling argument that the book is not random signs came when linguists discovered Zipf's law. This rule states that in any human language, word frequency obeys a strict mathematical pattern. The most common word appears roughly twice as often as the second most common, 3 times more than the third. The mysterious language of the manuscript, named Voynich by researchers, obeys this law with unsettling precision. This means the author followed the deep internal logic belonging only to living human speech. No one imitating language by producing meaningless noise could accidentally reproduce this delicate proportion. The manuscript's alphabet contains between 20 and 30 basic signs, most with no parallel in the history of writing. Words range from 2 to 10 letters. The text has no punctuation whatsoever, a continuous stream resembling an endless prayer. One of the most inexplicable features is the so-called ghost words, repeated several times in succession within the same sentence. Imagine speech in which you constantly say apple, 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 while still conveying coherent thought. In normal language, such redundancy is exceedingly rare. In the Voynich Manuscript, it is the norm, leaving linguists baffled. And the book contains not a single crossed-out letter or corrected word. Even more puzzles emerged when the text was found to be written in 2 distinct dialects, provisionally language A and language B. The sections on plants and stars were written using slightly different letter combination rules, as if 2 people of different backgrounds worked on the book together. This shattered the image of a lone madman and prompted scholars to wonder whether an entire secret society or dedicated school stood behind the text. One of the most realistic theories holds that the Voynich Manuscript is the sole surviving witness of a completely vanished culture. History offers no shortage of examples in which entire peoples and their languages disappeared in the wake of historical catastrophes, leaving behind only shards of pottery. Perhaps the author belonged to an isolated community in the Alpine valleys of northern Italy, whose language bore no resemblance to any neighboring dialect. If so, we are trying to find a key to a door that no longer exists. No algorithm will help without a living speaker or a parallel Latin translation. This transforms the manuscript from a puzzle into a time capsule, preserving the voice of people whose history came to an abrupt end in the middle of the 15th century. On the other hand, there exists a logical explanation capable of stripping the book of all its mystique. Researcher Gordon Rugg proposed the Cardan grill hypothesis, a special stencil with cutout slots placed over a table of syllables. By shifting this grill, an author could rapidly generate endless symbol combinations that look like a genuine language and obey mathematical distribution laws. This explains why there is not a single error in the manuscript. If the text carries no meaning, it is impossible to make an error in it. Such a book could have been produced as a clever forgery for wealthy collectors like Emperor Rudolph, willing to pay vast sums for magical secrets. If this theory is correct, history's greatest mystery turns out to be merely an unusual book masterfully disguised as the holy grail of science. Today, the Voynich Manuscript is kept under secure protection in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, stored in a specialized case with controlled temperature and humidity. Access to the original is granted to only a handful of the world's most eminent scholars. For everyone else, A high-quality digital copy allows anyone anywhere on the planet to attempt to find their own thread in this endless labyrinth of signs. Over the past 100 years, we have learned almost everything about the manuscript from the standpoint of physics and chemistry. We know the age of the parchment, the composition of the inks, the region of origin, and even the breed of cattle whose hides made the pages. We have examined every curve of every letter under a microscope and passed every word through the most powerful processors of our time. And yet, we have not advanced a single step in understanding what matters most. The book continues to keep its silence, as though mocking our conviction that any code can eventually be broken. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a unique object that has successfully resisted the full force of modern civilization. It is a reminder that even in our digital and transparent world, there remains room for absolute impenetrable mystery, mystery that cannot be bought and cannot be computed. Every time a new enthusiast announces a decryption, the scientific community finds flaws, and the book sinks back into silence. Perhaps the meaning of this message lies not in the words themselves, but in the journey we take while trying to decipher them, uniting linguists, physicists, and historians in a shared effort to understand the past. The story of this book has no ending, because every full stop in its study invariably becomes a question mark, receding into infinity. If you enjoy stories that make you question the obvious and search for answers in places science itself has not been able to reach, subscribe to this channel. We are only just beginning.